in. Okay, we're on the post show. Ed wanted me to mention something. Transparent is in the audience tonight. We appreciate you folks being here. Thank you very much. Don't applaud. Don't. Okay, I have a couple of things I wanted to talk about, but I'll start by just opening it up to the table. What do you wish that we would have talked about that we didn't? Where did you get cut off? I cut you off at the end of your last table, AJ.
Let's see, what was my point? What was the last point we were talking about?
Well, that's okay. We don't have to go there.
I think we should still take the suicide risk very seriously, even though it's common. That shouldn't diminish our saying it has to be rallied around, whether that's acutely getting services or really understanding what that means long term. So sometimes when we get a little bit of that statistic fatigue, then we don't really let it carry the weight that it needs to. And I think that was part of what we were talking about, the advocacy opportunities there as well.
I agree. I think there's so many huge issues with this, and we put it into one LGBT, but I mean, just the mental health side and the bullying alone, and just people's personal experience being gay, being the parent of a child who's gay. I mean, that could be a whole segment in itself, but then the housing and legal piece could be a segment all within itself too. So I mean, I think it's just such a growing issue. It's hard to cover.
Go a lot on social media, especially on Twitter, or people's reactions to the term gay marriage. So thinking about, no one says straight marriage. Why don't we start talking about terms around marriage equality? Or thinking about how loaded these terms are, how pejorative. And even if you really want to get real, right, marriage, in my opinion, is just state-sponsored hetero-patriarchy. So we're really going to dig down.
I love your college spirit.
We're really dig down, right? Even the Supreme Court, right? We're really not discussing issues that are going to affect LGBTQ people writ large, right? This is really for a middle class culture, right? Which is the same thing around civil rights movement for African Americans, right? And things to benefit middle class blacks. So in some ways, right, this LGBTQ push towards marriage equality, right, could also be argued in the same kind of privileged and the haves as well as the have-nots.
So that's an interesting point, Nadia, but what I would probably add to that argument.
Here, let me Donahue you here.
What I'd probably add to that argument is the fact that I don't know that the community really pushed directly for marriage. I think that to some degree we owe movement, and it's a controversial statement for me to make this statement, but I do believe that President George Bush actually pushed us into a moment where, because of the federal marriage amendment that he proposed back in 2003, 2004, based upon the Goodrich decision out of Massachusetts, which led to almost 10 years now of having marriage, it put us in a corner, and it put the movement at the time, which I was on the board of the Human Rights Campaign at the time, and we were talking about, prior to that coming out, we were talking about kitchen table issues. And that constituted 5 core elements, like visiting your partner in the hospital, inheritance rights, so you didn't lose out on the property you developed together as a partner. And one of the good things kind of looking at that going forward is the fact that we've evolved quite a bit. So when you say gay marriage or same-sex marriage, as a movement, what we've actually learned is that we don't say gay marriage. We shouldn't say same-sex marriage because it creates a separate category in the minds of the general population. So we really should talk about marriage as the core issue. But now, conversely, what we're also discovering, and my organization, Promo, is partnering with a group called Movement Advancement Project to try to understand more about discrimination. And how do we talk about discrimination? Because, for example, a core talking point is you can be fired if you're gay. Now, obviously, when you're talking within the community, it doesn't cover the entire broad spectrum of the LGBTQIAA, and if anybody can add all the other letters. But we do have to make sure that the target audience for that is the broader public, so we're doing that education.
And the thing I think we want to wrap up with is, before the decision comes out next week, we want to go and take a look at Edie Windsor's story. I mean, I think when we want to bring it back to the personal, if you have not seen the video of Edie Windsor, here's a woman who was with her partner for 40 years. They saw each other through breast cancer, through MS, and it really personalizes it. We forget sometimes it's the Supreme Court decisions, it's laws, it's conversations, it's theory. Watch Edie Windsor, watch Thea Spire. These are 2 women who were totally in love, and it's about their family. It's about the most personal thing that happens to us. And when we see Edie and we see Thea, everything else doesn't matter. And I think everybody gets it. It's about who we are as people, and that sort of lets us know where to be.
One other thing that I would like to make a point about in terms of LGBT health issues is that in a lot of ways we don't know what we don't know. one of the big problems in terms of medical research and data gathering is that for years there has basically been little or no research on LGBT health. So what we know is anecdotal, it's small studies. But when you look at what, for example, the Department of Health and Human Services has done, National Institutes of Health, things like that, there are these longitudinal studies that have been going on for years that look at large populations and look at and ask them questions on gender and on income level and ethnicity and where they live and religion. And questions around sexual orientation and gender identity have never been included. So the thing is that a lot of things that we know about health disparities in various populations come from researchers going, I wonder if there are issues that African Americans have around blood pressure. You can just go to this data set and look through it and go, look, there it is. That's never been done in the LGBT community. And so finally, the Department of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, has made a commitment to include those questions. But again, you get to the question of what is the question? Is it about who do you have sex with? Is it about who are you attracted to? Is it how you self-identify? There are a lot of people who may have sex with persons of the same gender, but they don't self-identify as gay or lesbian. So it's a really complex issue when it comes to medical concerns and healthcare concerns. And I think that may be part of why a lot of physicians don't bring it up. They just don't know what to do. But I also have to say that bringing it back to the personal and the individual story, when I'm in my practice at Cardinal Glennon and I have a teenager who comes in and I ask them that very sort of, just general question about are you sexually active? Is it with persons of the same gender, opposite gender, both? I mean, most kids go, opposite, occasionally go opposite. but every once in a while, a kid will get a quizzical look on her face and go, same. And I know I've sort of made a breakthrough there, that this is the first time that maybe this kid has been able to talk to a professional about this. And the fact that as a professional I have validated that this is something that's important is the kind of thing that kids need to hear, that anyone in healthcare needs to hear. And even if we don't know absolutely everything, what I would say to healthcare providers is ask the questions. Do it in a non-judgmental, professional way that shows that you're accepting of whatever answer you get. And for LGBT people, when you go to the doctor, tell them this. If they don't ask, tell them.
Okay, I think that's a great time to re-ask Amy's question from the table at the community, which was, what's the education? That's the education for the doctor. What's the education for the community? How can we be a better community?
This is a good storyteller. You made me tear up a little bit with that story. And as someone who wants to be a loving and inclusive community member, how can I do that better when I don't know what I don't know? I think it's an important discussion.
I was just going to say, I know I come from, I'm going now switching to my gear of mental health practitioner, and we talk all the time about leaving more open-ended questions instead of compartmentalizing so much. So for example, his questions are more detailed. My questions may be, tell me about the relationship you're in.
Exactly.
Tell me about, if they say I'm in love, tell me about the person that you were in love with. The second thing I do is I make sure I have a very large poster that's a rainbow that says straight ally, because I think that's a very important piece. I can't tell you how many of the kids I've worked with that just seeing that ally poster was enough for them to sit down and say, okay, I can talk to you. So I think so much of it is, and this part is what gets me excited, because the bullying part's a huge piece. There's a ton of research on it. I feel movement in that area, but really good people want to learn how to use more inclusive language. And they do say things, example, when did you know you were gay? Well, for a lot of gay people, that is a very embarrassing question. For them, they think, well, when did you know you were straight? And then I think, I don't think I ever thought about it. Do you know what I mean? So there's so much language that we can learn, those of us who are inclusive and are accepting. And I feel like PFLAG does a really good job with that as well, to help with parents, because the people that are coming here are trying to become more accepting, and we can help with the inclusive language, which is even a higher level.
I think breaking down those barriers, the illustration of the sign that you have in your office, I wear a cross around my neck most days. So I wonder if some people see that and say, oh, I can't talk to her.
They may.
So, kind of from both directions. They
might. I mean, I'm gay, and we talked about this before.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before, just in the faith community. We really didn't touch on that too much. But, how do we break, it is, because how do we break down those barriers? We make so many assumptions about what people stand for.
Right. And the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender population will absolutely tell you that they make stereotypes as well. They might see a 75-year-old female that says she's from the country and assume, oh, well, no way is she accepting, and she could be the most accepting person.
Right.
So there is a lot of dialogue that goes on that for us to let them know that there's stereotypes both ways.
And I'd like to put, as a member of the media, I don't think we can discount the power of the media and also the responsibility of the media. We talk about the gay marriage versus same-sex marriage. I argue that let's not get so caught up in the title as so much as what's in the story itself. Sometimes the headline for space reasons will say gay marriage, but the story will go in and be an explainer as to why that's important and why the fight is going forward. And so for me, as someone who covers the community, it's good for for the people who aren't experts at the table, who want to, how can I help? It's knowing the right language. It's writing so that my parents and your parents can read this and understand, I get it now. I thought that, I didn't realize there were so many people out there without rights in housing and in healthcare and just in thousands of dollars in taxes. We heard the clip earlier from the two women. So I'm just saying I have a huge responsibility there, but it's through working with folks like this and having shows like this that I think will make a difference. And so I think it's great that we're all here.
Absolutely. I would also add to that. I mean, I think that the conversations are absolutely critical, and telling stories are really critical. But getting involved politically is also very critical, because guess who writes our laws? The people who sit in Jefferson City, who AJ goes down every single week to lobby during the legislative session, the people who sit in Congress. It's important, and that's one thing that all of us can do in our communities. I serve on the PAC board for Promo and have really had a tremendous experience getting to know what politicians stand for and what their positions are. And what I found, not only is that really important for me as a voter, but what I find is that we often end up educating them as well.
We'll have to end it there. We're going to run out of bandwidth, I guess, not airtime. Thanks, guys. Good job. John was nervous about his first time on the show, but I thought he did great.
I'm like sweating.
Yeah. Good night. Thanks for watching.